Okay, welcome everybody back to Trudging the Road of Happy Destiny. This is where we study the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to learn recovery. My name is Dan Habecker, and I am an alcoholic and drug addict, and my sobriety date is 1/25/91. Um, what we're basically doing is we're going to go through this so we can learn the steps so that we can recover from the disease of alcoholism. Um, Now, what does trudging mean? It means to walk steadily and laboriously, which for us means to be devoted to hard work of the steps without stopping. And then what does destiny mean? Something to which a person is destined for, or a predetermined course of events often held to be an irresistible power. So we're walking through the work of the steps to a predetermined course of irresistible power. That's pretty cool, don't you think? Because it's like we're already predetermined by God to work these steps so that we can recover. And I think we're pretty lucky to be able to have that. We're going to start out doing the first step, and we're going to start at the doctor's opinion. And with the doctor's opinion, what we're going to learn is we're going to learn about the allergy of the body and the obsession in the mind. The allergy of the body is what makes it so that we cannot stop or control our drinking or using. And the obsession of the mind makes it so that we cannot stay away from a drink or a drug when we are trying to. Um, Alcoholism, it's been around forever. And it's not just some new thing that has happened. And a guy named Solomon, he wrote about alcoholism. And he was the psychiatrist of the day or whatever. He could basically fix anybody's problem. But when it came to alcoholism, he didn't understand it and didn't know what to do with it. And he says, who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has wounds without cause? Who has redness of eyes? They that tarry long at the wine. And back then they didn't have the hard stuff, they just had wine. And then it says, you will be as one who stooped in the midst of a sea. And so that's basically like, when you're drunk and you're walking around and you're bouncing back and forth. And then it says, or that sleepeth at the top of a tall mast. And like when you go to sleep and you're bouncing around in the bed and stuff. Then it says, you will say, they have beaten me, and I felt it not. You wake up the next day with bruises or whatever it may be, and you don't know how you got it. Then it says, and thine eyes shall behold strange women. And so our eyes are always wandering around looking at different women and stuff like that. Then it says, and then in thine heart shall utter perverse things. It's like we would go and we would say things that we didn't want to say, we didn't mean to say, but we ended up hurting people. And yet they will rise in the morning and seek it yet again. And that's a total description of alcoholism today, if you ask me. And that's the same things that we do. And that was, I don't know, 4,000 years ago that he wrote that. This doctor, Dr. Silkworth, he he worked with many alcoholics, and he's the one that helped Bill to be able to find out what his problem is. The same as what our problem is that we have this craving of the body and an obsession of the mind. And because of those two, it makes us powerless. And he wrote a little bit on a paper here. I'll go ahead and read it. And it says, he began to work with people like us and began to see us come into the hospital. Terrible, terrible physical and mental condition. And he began to withdraw us from alcohol, build up the body, and etc. And 60 or 90 days later, we would leave and see us, and he would see us leave the hospital in reasonably good shape. And then a month or two later, he would see us come back in worse shape than we were the first, or the continuous, and we would continue this over and over, going in and out, in and out. And he also noticed other people who drank moderately and safely. And he began to say, there's something different about these alcoholics. There's something different about the body. Apparently, alcohol does something to them that it doesn't do to normal people. And he began to develop this theory that whenever you put alcohol into your body, it would produce an actual physical craving that makes it impossible for us to stop on our own mental control. And that's not the he say after that, he says that that's not the real problem of the alcoholic. He said the real problem is that the alcoholic cannot stop or keep from drinking, because we would stay away from a drink, we wouldn't be craving it, but then our minds would turn around and take us back. And he said people who are heavy drinkers, people who are moderate drinkers, if they want to quit drinking, they just quit, and it doesn't bother them at all. But it seems as though the alcoholic, after they quit, the mind begins to play tricks on them and begins to think, and he begins to think about one or two drinks and how it makes them feel. And he said that that idea becomes so powerful that it overcomes the idea that we can't drink, and they and then we take the drink and end up drunk every time. So he said, now if you can't drink safely, and if you can't keep from drinking, then you are powerless over alcohol. And that's our problem. And that's what we need to work on, so that we don't stay continually doing the things um, that we're doing. And I never totally understood the part when, like, a hard drinker, one that drank like an alcoholic and acted like an alcoholic, but then he's just able to stop. And until I looked at my brother, and my brother back when he was younger, he drank just like me, did drugs just like me, and did all kinds of crazy, stupid stuff. And then one day he ended up getting a tattoo, and the doctor said that he got hepatitis C and he can't drink no more. And he just put it down. Didn't pick it up, didn't think about it, just put it down. And every once in a while, even today, he'll have a beer or two when he's sitting around with friends watching a football game or whatever it may be, and he can have one or two, put it down, and drink a Coke. And that blew my mind. I mean, I'd never been able to do nothing like that. And I swore to God he was an alcoholic. If there was an alcoholic, it was my brother. And but come to find out, no, he's not an alcoholic, because two things he does not have. Now, he drank like me. And sometimes the non-alcoholic, the hard drinker may need help to be able to get through it, but generally they don't. But their minds do not play tricks on them and tell them go back and drink. Their minds don't say, well, the hepatitis, who cares? It's okay. I can get through it. So I'll go ahead and drink. Or I'll drink until, well, I get really sick, whatever it may be. Their minds don't do that. My mind or our minds do those crazy things. And so now we're going to go into the doctor's opinion. And in the doctor's opinion, he's going to talk about all of this stuff. And he's going to give us as much information about all of this so then we can see our problem, see why we need to work on it, and then find a recovery to this problem that we have with alcohol or drugs. And it says, the physician who, at our request, gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe. And now in AA or in the fellowship, there's no must. But in this book, well, there's 130 of them. That the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. And so he's telling us that we need to know that this abnormal, what's abnormal? Abnormal is to act in a different way than what majority of people do. And so if the majority of people are able to take a drink, put it down and have no problems with it, well, that's what the majority would do. But we're abnormal, or at least I'm abnormal to the point that I pick up a drink and I lose all control. And so because of that, I'm considered to be abnormal. Um, and then it says, it did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or were outright mental defects. These things were true to some extent. In fact, to a considerable extent with some of us. But we are sure our bodies were sickened as well. And so the reason for this is because they knew, or they knew they these people they knew, or the alcoholics they're talking about, they knew they were strong-minded and had a lot of willpower. So it can't it can't be just the mind. There's got to be some other problem here. And this is what I would always tell myself because I knew I could do a lot of things. I knew I could mentally do a lot of things. So there's got to be something else to this picture, but I never knew what. And then it says, in our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. And it's because it's leaving out the question, it's leaving the question open to, okay, what is the problem? Because it still hasn't solved it. Okay, you drink too much and you can't control your drinking. Well, that doesn't answer it. It doesn't, that's not enough information. The doctor's theory that we have an allergy, which is an abnormal reaction, which is like I just got done saying, to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion to its soundness may, of course, mean little. But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say that his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account. And the things that they could not ever account for was why they can't control or stop their drinking once they start. that I couldn't account for that. I had no idea why that was. And so the only thing that um, the only thing AA has to offer is a spiritual way of life, which is the solution to the problem that we have. Because if I've tried everything human, I've tried to work through all this stuff, and I can't do this, then obviously I need something that's beyond human. But we're going to go into more of that later. And so, what we're going to look at now is this body and the craving that is in this body, because that's something that we have to know. And it's something that, to me, it was very interesting because it finally answered the question that I always had of why I can't control. I always wanted to control, but I never knew why. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was weak. I thought I was crazy. I thought everything. But I never could come up with an answer of why I can't control. And back with the doctor in the 1930s, they didn't know anything about metabolism. They didn't know how the body broke things down. And so the only thing he could say was, well, they have an allergy, which an abnormal reaction that what other people don't have. Person who's allergic to milk. He drinks milk, he gets sick, he vomits or has dysentery or whatever, but he's different than the people who are able to drink milk. And so that's exactly the same thing with us, except for you can't see our allergy. You can't see our sickness. It is only in an alcoholic, and we're the only ones that can feel it. And that's why it's so hard for a lot of people to understand or to be able to recognize why we have this or what it really is. And back in those days, the only thing he could say to it was an allergy because we acted different than other people. In 1952, 1953, the Medical Association and Psychiatric Association, they finally proved that alcoholism is a disease, that it is a malady of our body. Our bodies do react different than the non alcoholics. Something happens in our body, which I'm going to go through, and they found it to be true that when we take a drink, it actually does make this craving that the doctor was talking about back in the 30s. And so with metabolism, um, it today they know that if we put anything into our body or into our system, such as bread, steak, alcohol, whatever, drugs, it's all the same. Um, the mind and the body recognize what it is, and then the certain organs in our body begin to produce some things that are called enzymes. They attack the food and begin to break it down into and separate it into usable and non-usable items. What the body can use, such as the proteins, amino acids, and the vitamins, the body will retain. What it can't use, it will dissipate through the urinary and intestinal tract, in which this is metabolism. This is how our body metabolizes anything that we put in it. And um, and so what happens is the non-alcoholic, they take a drink, and these enzymes, they're made and they're whatever they're produced. And so what happens here is the first stage, it'll break it down into acetaldehyde. The second stage will break it down to diacetic acid. The third stage, it will break it down into acetone. And then the final stage, it will become a simple carbohydrate, which is made up of water, sugar, and carbon monoxide. The water will be dissipated through the urinary and intestinal tract. The sugar, it's calories, it's energy. And so the body will use that form of energy, and the body will burn it and then store the excess as fat to be used at a later date. Then it'll be breaking it down into carbon monoxide, which will be dissipated through the lungs. This is for the non-alcoholic, and this process basically happens an ounce per hour. And if you drink basically an ounce of alcohol per hour, they won't get drunk. And so what happens with the alcoholic, though, our bodies break it down a little bit different than the non-alcoholic. The non-alcoholic, they put it in their body and it breaks it down so fast that they don't ever get a craving in their body. And it says, okay, for the alcoholic, the first stage, it breaks it down to acetaldehyde. Second stage to diacetic acid. The third stage to acetone. And then that final stage, for some reason, it's like brakes hit and it slows down. And it doesn't break it down at the same rate as the non-alcoholic. They break it down 100% per hour. Maybe we break it down at 50% an hour. And as though in our bodies, the enzymes necessary to complete this metabolism breakdown from acetone to the simple carbohydrate are not there in the same qualities or quantities as they are in the body of the non-alcoholic. Therefore, it stays in our bodies for a longer period of time as acetone. It is proven today that acetone ingested into the human system that remains there for an appreciable period of time will produce an actual physical craving for more of the same, of whatever that may be. Now it will produce a craving within us, and that craving ends up being more powerful than our minds to stop. And that answered so much for me, because I would be drinking and I'd be getting drunk, and then I would say, you need to slow down. I would tell myself, well, you need to stop. You need to save some for later. You need to not spend your whole check. I told myself all kinds of, and I could never stop. And I never understood why, because I honestly wanted to stop and I couldn't. And that's why I got to a point. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was stupid. I thought I was weak. I mean, what's wrong with me? I cannot control how much I'm drinking, but not even control it. I can't stop now that I even want to. And so in the non-alcoholic body, the acetone, it goes through there so fast that they never even crave alcohol. But in our bodies, it stays there longer, which this craving is developed, and then it demands that we have to drink more, use more drugs, whatever it may be. And anyone out there that, if you're listening to this and you're an alcoholic, you definitely can identify with this. And so what happens is I would take a drink, wanting to feel good, wanting to get drunk, whatever it was, but I would take the drink, and within an hour, say my body breaks it down at 50% an hour. Well, in that hour, my body broke down 50% of the acetone, but the other 50 is still left in me. And now I take another drink. Well, now I take the other drink. Now I have 100% of the acetone in my body and 50% of it from the first drink. Now my body begins craving. And then my body turns around and I have another drink. And now I have the third drink. I have still some left from the first, 100% from the second, 100% from the third, and now the craving goes even higher. And then I have so much acetone that is in my body that no matter what my mind tries to tell me, my body has more power than my mind to stop. And that's what answered for me why I could never stop or control the amount that I was going to drink or use, because I always had that question. I never understood why. And when I heard this, I was like, holy shit, man, that is me to a T. And it answered it. I mean, it's not going to solve the problem, but at least now I understand the problem. At least I know, okay, why I have this. I'm not crazy. I'm not insane. I'm not stupid. I'm not weak. I have an illness in my body that's proven by doctors, psychiatrists, and the medical foundation that I actually do have this. And that right there made it so I could understand what was wrong with me. And that's very, very important, because we need to know what is wrong with us if we're ever going to work towards a solution. Because if I don't see what is wrong with me, why would I work for a solution? There's no need for a solution. And I would continue to try and drink. There had to be a way that I could drink and not get in trouble. There had to be a way that I could drink and do it successfully. There had to be a way that I could drink and not get drunk. And I continued to try that and try until I almost killed myself. And so now I see this. It doesn't stop it, but it sure as hell does make that answer that I need to hear. The also what happens is in our bodies, every human being in the world, our bodies start to die. And as our bodies start to die, well, the enzymes that produced in the body to break things down become less and less. And this is where people would go back to a drink, and when they would go back to it, they would always drink harder than when they stopped. And so what happens is the liver and the pancreas are the two main organs, one that break down alcohol, and two develop and break down the acetone that's needed to be broke down so that this craving doesn't happen. And so now that we age, our bodies break it down less. So when I stopped, I was at 50%. Now I go back after a few months, few years, whatever, and now my body breaks it down at 25%. So where I craved at a certain point when I stopped, now I crave even harder for more. And so the drinking becomes harder. And then when the drinking becomes harder, well, then the problems are going to become more. The problems become more. Then I start to have remorse or guilt of the things that I've been doing. And then because of that, that makes for more drinking. And it's a cycle that will never stop. And so now, if I cannot drink safely, well, then the thing would be, okay, quit, just don't drink. But I have a second problem. And the second problem is my mind. My mind will believe, obsess, believe a lie, and want to drink and lead me to believe that it is okay to drink. One of the biggest reasons is because alcohol has always made me feel good. Drugs always made me feel good. So my mind remembers that and wants to go back to it. And so what he says now with this obsession is the doctor, or he says we doctors have realized for a long time that some form of moral psychology, and which is the changed distinction between right and wrong thinking and actions, was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulty beyond our conception. And so he's saying they didn't know um, about how to change the way we thought. They didn't know how to make it so that we would be able to not desire, not obsess over a drink. And he's saying, so some other kind of power is needed for this to happen. They were not able to give it to us. And this is because the ability to change an alcoholic or a drug addict, the ability to bring us to recovery must come from a power greater than ourselves and outside of the human mind. So if we are trying to recover, or if they are trying to help us recover using something with the human mind alone, it will not work because we are 100% beyond human aid. Um, and then it turns around and he goes into talk more about this. And um, he says, they believe this is what happens with us after they got sober and started working this program. And it says they believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. And basically, well, this is God. And this is the only place, in the doctor's opinion, that he uses a capital P for power, in which that means God. And so what he's saying is we believe in ourselves, which means the whole fellowship, because we need fellowship. And then he says, then still more. So we have more belief in this power that is going to pull us back from the gates of death. And so that's saying that we need to have the fellowship to support and help and guide us. But we mainly need is the power from God, and that's going to change us. And then it says, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic, and all chronic means is something that happens over and over. Alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving, and this only happens after we take one, two, or three drinks. We don't crave alcohol or drugs unless we put it in the system, is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. This is our mental state before we take the first drink. And we hate the way that we are the way that we are feeling. And so alcohol at this point is the only thing we know that makes us feel better. Um, and we've tried everything at this point humanly possible to deal with these emotions and our problems with life on our own, and nothing has worked for us. We have lost our self confidence in believing we can work through them, and they continue getting worse. So everything in our life continues getting worse because we don't know how to deal with this stuff. And then we are not able to produce within ourselves the good feelings we are looking for, or the ability to believe that we can fix and handle what needs to be done. Then we go back to alcohol or drugs as a solution to these problems, and we use the alcohol and drugs to fix the problem, but then the allergy kicks in, and we can't stop or control it. And this will happen over and over. And what happens here? The mind destroys the body from the drinking and using and driving us back to it. Then the body destroys the mind from us not having the ability to stop or control it. And the alcohol and drugs will kill the mind because it'll break it completely down. Um, and then it says, the message, which can interest and hold these alcoholic people, must have depth and weight. And so this means that telling us we can't drink won't work. There has to be a reason that we can't, that we can believe. And that's where I just got done talking about that craving, that allergy. I needed to know that. I needed to know what the medical system was of how I broke things down and why it didn't work. I needed to know that. And the doctor's opinion, he's telling us it's very important. We must believe this. And then after we see that, now the doctor he will give us some hope um, for this problem that we have with drugs and alcohol and the mind. And he says, in nearly all cases, their ideas must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Meaning, we cannot change on human power, we must change with God's help. If any feel that as psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand a while with us on the firing line. And so he's saying that, I mean, these people, we got all kinds of problems. And the other doctors that are out there that are saying, oh, that doesn't work, and they're laughing about it. Well, come over on this side and see what it's really all about. And so he's saying that they have not found anything better than the 12 steps, God, and helping others in keeping us sober. And still to this present day, that's the truth. Because those are the main number one things that we need. The 12 steps, which bring us to God. Then, with working with God, we change, and then we're able to go out and help others so that they can accomplish and have the same thing. Then it tells us here we're still working on the mind. This is still the obsession. And it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol or drugs. The main reason we drink is for the effect that drinking gives us. This is very true for me. I drank because I liked what alcohol did for me, what drugs did for me. Not what they did to me, but what they did for me. It made me feel part of the crowd. It made me feel okay with myself as if I could handle anything. It made me feel things that it didn't make those non alcoholic people feel. It made me feel different, and I loved it. It produced in me what I always wanted, such as feeling adequate, likable, lovable, and wanted a sense of worthiness and belonging. It gave me all the things I looked for in life that I couldn't find on my own power. It's it became my solution to the things I thought or felt that I didn't like and could not control on my own power. I drank because I loved what it did for me. It was my solution to change my emotional problems. If you ever hear anybody say, "Oh, we don't talk about emotions," or we don't work on emotions, that's for sissies or whatever, well, tell them they better shut the hell up because they don't know anything about this book. And in this book, they talk about emotions and our feelings. Why? Because that is why we drink. We drink and get high because we do not feel good. Then the more we drink, the worse the problems get. The worse the problems get, then we end up harming others, and then life gets harder. And what happens is that's the unmanageability that happens from our drinking and not being able to have control over our emotions. Our emotions are all messed up. And with that happening and then drinking, your life is going to be unmanageable. And let me tell you now, if your life isn't unmanageable now, we'll keep on drinking and doing drugs because it will become unmanageable. And then he says, the sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. And so the sensation is so good, or we feel so good from drinking or using that we can't see the truth. And we think that this time will be different. And we won't do those stupid things that we did in the past. This time, we will handle ourselves better or differently. We cannot see the true from the false. The true is that we cannot drink or use safely. And because of the craving in the body, I will never be able to do that. But this obsession, that's what leads me back to a drink. That's why it's so important to work on this obsession. Because the drinking, I can't do anything about the body. The craving is there. I'm a diabetic. And I could wish I could do anything I wanted to be able to not have to use insulin. If I don't use insulin, I die. There's nothing I can do about the body. It's the same thing here. There's nothing that we can do about this craving. It is there. But if we do not put alcohol or drugs into our system, then we cannot, will not crave alcohol or drugs. And so the problem is, I need to work on my mind so it stops driving me back to a drink and thinking this is what I need to be the solution to my emotional problems and the things that I can't handle in life. And then it says to them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. And the only normal life that we know is the life that we are living while drinking or using, because we haven't ever lived any other way, or we have lived this way for so long, it's become normal. They are restless, irritable, and discontented. And we feel this when we're sober, not drunk or using. When I'm drunk and high, I don't feel anything. That's why I drink and get high, so I don't feel anything. But when I'm not drinking, I'm restless, irritable, discontent. And then on top of that, really, if you're an alcoholic long enough, well, then I have fear, resentment, shame, guilt, and all these things, they eat me alive. Um, and so then, what is restless? And restless is equivalent to being dishonest. And when we are dishonest, we feel agitated, and when agitated, we are restless and we don't feel right. And so that's one of the feelings that we have, which drives us back to a drink. Then to be irritable means to be fearful. When when we are full of fear, fancied or real, we don't feel good. And to be irritable, we feel annoyed, and fear will bring on irritability. Discontentment is resentment, because when we have resentments, we are discontented and not at ease with ourselves, and we are feeling displeasure. We feel these when we are sober, and we don't like to have these feelings So we drink or use to get rid of these feelings. Um, we don't know any other way of how to deal with these things because we've never learned, and or at least I never learned, but most alcoholics I've worked with, they haven't either. So now we have to work these steps so that we can learn a different way, so that we can change the way that we think, which changing the way that we think will change the way that we feel and our actions. That's what we're working for here. And then it says, unless they can experience the sense of ease and comfort which come at once by taking a few drinks. And so we remember what alcohol and drugs do for us, not what they do to us. Our minds don't remember getting into trouble or doing something stupid and not feeling right after we have started drinking or using. Our minds remember the sense of ease and comfort we get immediately after the first drink or drug. And this is what we are looking for. Telling somebody to think of the past, telling somebody to remember the pain you put your mother through and all that will not happen. It will not work for us. And the reason that is when I've gotten to a point that I'm wanting to have a drink, when I get to the point of where my mind now is desiring a drink, two things happen. One, my willpower that I'm using to try to keep me from drinking becomes non existent, because now what happens is this obsession, an obsession is an idea that is so powerful that it will push out any other idea that is in our mind. So if my mind is fighting to stay sober, what happens when this obsession comes in, it will push out that idea and the obsession will win. And so trying to remember my mother's tears, my tears, and all this other kind of stuff will not work, because the obsession will push it out. The other is when I'm to a point where I want to drink, when I'm to a point that I want to get drunk. I don't care about the past. I don't care about that I couldn't drink then. I'm worried about right now, this moment. And right now, this moment, I don't feel good. I'm not at ease with myself and other people, and I need something to make me feel better, but I don't have anything and I don't know anything to make me feel better. So what happens is my mind remembers what alcohol and drugs do for me. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm not going to look at the past. I'm going to only look at what is it going to give me. And right now, I know it will make me feel good. So what? I'm going to drink and I'm going to get high, because I have no power to stop this. And then it says drinks which they see others taking with impunity, in which the non alcoholic people don't get into trouble and are able to handle and control a few drinks. And well, that's what I always wanted to do. I hated those people that they were able to do that, but I never understood why or how they could do that. Well, they didn't have this craving in the body. They had one, two, or three drinks, and that's all they wanted. They got every bit of alcohol that they wanted every time they drank. I never once got all I wanted to drink or all the drugs I wanted out of all the time that I used. Never once. I always wanted more, and I never got enough. They got as much as they wanted every time. That's why they don't get drunk. That's why they don't need to drink anymore, because they got all that they wanted. I'd be looking at them saying, man, why don't you want to drink more? Because I don't want to. I got all I wanted, and I never could understand that. Now I can, because the reason is that they don't have this allergy in the body that makes it to where they can't control. They're able to control it. We, as alcoholics, real alcoholics, are not able to control it. And because of that, we end up drunk, sick, and all kinds of trouble. And then it says, after they have succumbed to the desire, and the desire is always the mind when you're reading in this big book. Again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving is developed, and which the allergy is the craving, and craving, um, whenever he talks about craving in the big book, he only means or is talking about the allergy. And a phenomenon, what's a phenomenon? A phenomenon is something that you cannot explain. You see it, but you can't explain it. And that's what it was with our drinking. We could see it. You could see we drink too much, we do too much, but why? And there was no answer. Well, thank God there is an answer today. And and then it says they pass through a well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. And the psychic change that we're working towards is a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience, which is a personality change that is sufficient enough to recover from alcoholism. That's what we are looking for. That is what we need to have in order for us to get rid of this desire that we have that continually leads us back to a drink. But if I don't have that, it will always overpower me and I will always go back to a drink. That's why we have to work these steps. And then it says, this is to be powerless. This is what it means by powerless. If you cannot safely drink or use because of the body or the allergy, and you can't quit because of the obsession of the mind, you are powerless over alcohol and drugs. And the entire psychic change the doctor is talking about is when our emotions, attitudes, and ideas toward life and the people in it have changed for the better. If we can have this psychic change from working the steps and God, then we will have a personality change that is sufficient to recover from the disease of alcoholism. Then we don't need to drink or use to feel better because why? Because now this power changes us and does all of this for us. The real problem centers in the mind, telling us we can drink or use, while the body will ensure that we can't drink or use. He's going to now confirm um, what I was just saying or what I was just talking about. And he says, on the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol or drugs, the only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. And these are the 12 steps that we have to follow so we can learn to work with this power and then get rid of the things in us that block us. Um, and then this is going to tell us what recovery is. And it says, if you practice these 12 steps or this way of life, it will expel the obsession or desire to drink or use and make you happy and whole. And this is recovery. So then, From working the steps, we are happy and whole, and we don't need a drink or a drug to change the way we feel. This is the recovery that we are looking for. And that's what this book gives us. That's what these steps do for us. And they bring us to God because God's the one that's going to change us. Humans can't change us, and I can't change me. God is the only one that can do that. And then it says, men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. And that's because we are 100% beyond human aid. And the reason that this works is because God is the one that has the power. We don't. And so we want to work with God and work these steps so that we can get the power. And then he's going to tell us about working um, like hard drinkers and what the psychic change has been able to do with them and how it doesn't work with the alcoholic. And he says, though the aggregate, which is the sum or mass of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort, is considerable. I mean, they've been able to help a lot of people. We physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. Many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach. And so he's telling us straight out that these alcoholics here know it doesn't work. I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. And I wish it was only a mental control, but it's not. And I don't have the control. If I had the control, well, I would have done this a long time ago. And I wouldn't have gone through the pain I went through, and I wouldn't have put my family and everybody through the pain that I did. I am beyond human aid. So if I'm beyond human aid, I have to find some kind of power that is going to help me get the power that I need. And then he says, I have had men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal which was to be settled on a certain date favorably to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date. And so basically, they end up happy because they're getting through it, or they have some kind of emotion of maybe regret, maybe fear, whatever it may be, but some kind of emotion inside them made the desire happen to have a drink. And that desire overpowered the idea to not drink, and then they end up drinking. And then it says, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond mental control. And so the mind led them to the drink. They picked up the drink. Once the phenomenon of craving happened, now the important date it's not met because the only thing that we want to do now is drink or drug. The craving has taken over and we cannot stop. And I think most of us that are listening to this can understand that because this is what happens to a lot of us. And what we have to understand too is us as alcoholics, what we have in common is not the things we do, not the things that we think, not the places we've been. What we have in common right now at this step is we have a craving in the body that is beyond our mental control. And that is the only thing that we have in common. That is the only thing that we can come to um, understand with each other. You could be sitting there and somebody say, "Oh, well, I've been to jail 67 times." And you have another guy that's sitting there and he's like, "Well, man, I ain't never been in jail before. I'm not like these people." He can't understand. But now you turn around and you say, "Well, you know what? I would start drinking. This desire would take me and I would go and I'd want to have a couple. I'd go down the street, I'd go to the bar, and I would have one drink, two drinks, and I would intend on going home. But then something would happen. Something inside me would happen, and I don't know what it was, but I couldn't stop drinking. And somehow, some way, I had to stay there and drink, even though I was telling myself to leave. And then I finally got to a point that it's not even worth trying because for some reason I can't leave. And I would be stuck there. And my body literally wanted more. And I didn't know what that was. Well, now we do. And I can say, well, that is the craving. The craving would happen in our body. That craving is so strong that it will overpower the thought to stop. And then we are not able to stop and we end up drunk, sick, and all kinds of trouble. And then what happens is tomorrow I wake up and now I'm full of remorse. I'm full of regret. I'm mad at myself that I went and I did it again. And why couldn't I control? And now I'm full of guilt, shame, remorse, fear. I'm restless, irritable, discontented. And all those emotions I don't know how to get rid of except by taking a drink. And I can't live like that. No human being in the world could live feeling that way. So my mind says, you need to take a drink. And now I'm at a state where I'm back drinking. So my mind, yes, it leads me to continue drinking. And I can't stop. And I do this over and over and over. And if that is true for you, I know it's true for me, then I need to find something that is going to change the way that I think and feel when it comes to alcohol, drugs, and life itself. And if I can't find this, then I'm going to continue going back to a drink over and over and over, and eventually it will kill me. And if it doesn't kill me physically, it's definitely going to kill me mentally. And I'd rather die physically than mentally because the mental torture, it's so agonizing. It rips you apart. It rips you in two. And I don't care who the alcoholic is. You don't have to be to all kinds of crazy places. It's just that torture that you feel within yourself. And then the weak inadequacy that I can't handle a liquid that's in a glass. What is wrong with me? And it drives us insane. And there's two questions that every alcoholic has always asked. And one is, why can I not continue to drink like I used to and have fun and not get in trouble? And the second, why can't I stop now that I want to? And those are two very, very important questions. And hopefully, I just answered those for you so that you can be able to learn that, know it, and be able to teach that to the people that you work with. Because that's our whole message, our whole point is to be able to learn this stuff so we can get our lives in order, then go help others get theirs in order. Two things you cannot give an alcoholic. One is the honest desire to stop drinking or using drugs. And after that is the honest desire to work these steps to get a relationship with God. I have to have a relationship with God, which is a power greater than you. In the big book, it says God 137 times, so I think Bill meant God. But it's a God of your understanding. And right now, you're not going to understand it. All we're looking at now really is the problem. And the problem is that we don't have power. We are powerless, so we need power. Well, in the big book, it only says powerless one time, and that is on page 59. That's the first step. It is the only place that it says powerless, I mean. 67 times it talks about getting power into our lives. So that is the main object of this book, is to get power in our lives so that we can change. And really the power is what's going to change us. And so the reason why, yes, I mean, you'll find out later on that we're powerless over some other things rather than drugs and alcohol. But right now, this is all we're looking at because we're at step one. And so right now, with being powerless, well, why does it only say it one time? Well, you go into the second step, and what does it say? Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. And so, in the second step, we start to get power. Now, it might not be a lot of power, it might be very, very minimal power, but you cannot have power and powerless at the same time. You have to be either powerless or have power. So the first step, we find out we're powerless. We go into the second step, and now we start to get power. And the reason that is because we're getting this power into our life, and we're getting the power of the fellowship into our lives, which are two magnificent powers that are strong enough to overcome our desires to drink and are able to recover us from the disease of alcoholism. That's what we're looking for. I hope that I have explained the doctor's opinion to a point that you can understand it and answered, I hope, a lot of questions. And the next segment, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Bill's story. It won't be as long as this, but so that people can see how we are just like Bill. I always thought, well, Bill's different than me, older than me, did this, did that. Long time ago, he got sober, and so I couldn't relate until I really studied his story. And when I did that, I found out I am exactly like him. Exactly. Because why? I was always looking at things rather than the emotions, the way that he drinks, why he would drink, and then how he lost control with his drinking, and then it destroyed his life. That's what I need to be looking at. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I am just like him. And so that will be what we'll go to next. Um, like I said, I hope that you got what you need out of this. Um, the Listen to this and read the big book. You got to study the big book. That's where all our answers are. All the directions are in that big book. And we need to study it so that we can have happiness, joy, and freedom in our lives, and so that we never have to drink or use again. That's what this program is for and meant to do. Um, if you want, my email is sbtlhd@gmail.com. Please email me. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you want question or have questions or you don't like it. I mean, whatever it may be, but contact me. Let me know. Help me so that I can learn. and help me to know if it is helping you, because that's my main point of doing this. My main point is to be able to help others grow with this program and be able to get what they've always been looking for, which is happiness in our lives. That's what we're all looking for. And so hopefully you can see some of that. If you want, I wrote a book, and the book is A Road to Recovery by Dan H. And you can get it on Amazon. And what the book is it's the big book. It's from the preface all the way through chapter 7, which is the 12 steps. And I break it down paragraph by paragraph by paragraph, teaching the reader everything there is in that book. Um, it is accepted by Alcoholics Anonymous, or there's a disclaimer in it saying that they do approve of the book. And I had to get that because, well, it's their book. I couldn't just write it unless they agreed with it, which that was a huge honor right there. Um, and if you want, it will explain all the stuff that we just got done talking about and even more. Hopefully, everybody got something out of this. And until the next time, have a really, really good night, and I'll see you later.